What is happening, everybody? I'm Sara and this is Branded. Larry is currently recording for ABC, so apparently that's more important than our podcast. I guess I get it. But thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is Tim Kalinowski. Said it right, I think. He is an award-winning brand and creative expert with over 25 years of experience crafting powerful customer-centered stories. Basically, he's been doing this since before I was alive. It's fine. Tim's unique blend of creative vision and data-driven strategy is shaping global campaigns, and he proves that the most memorable brands are the ones brave enough to be different, and I love that. So we're going to dig in a little bit about brand storytelling and how to be different. And Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
This is our first recording of the new year, and one thing that I want to ask you, because you are an expert in having brands stand out and get noticed and really get their stories out there. What would you say should be a brand's New Year's resolution when it comes to reaching those audiences and building connections and everything?
Listen, get out of your own way. I think that's probably one of the themes I've learned the most throughout my career is people get in their own way and they start believing what they want to say versus what customers want or need to hear, and they lose track of that. That's the key cornerstone of everything, in my opinion, my experience.
Yeah, anytime I'm talking to someone, because I work on like brand messaging and everything as well, and they ask me how are they supposed to know what their audience wants and what their customers want, and when I tell them the answer, it's always really anticlimactic. Because I'm like, ask them. And they just look at me like, wow, I never thought of that. But it's the most simple thing.
Well, and what's really crazy. So we work with, the big of the big and some of the small, right? So, I mean, we've helped businesses that are kind of solopreneurs to, pretty large household names that you've seen. And the one thing that seems really interesting to me is I see it both internally within marketing departments of companies and just even with smaller businesses where they haven't asked the questions, or even with salespeople where I've had a salesperson say, well, this is who our audience is. And I'm like, do you really understand who they are? And then have you done the math to understand if I only focus on who I think my core audience is, am I taking that circle and making my audience bigger continually to understand who else could benefit from my products or services? So yeah, there's a whole bunch, and I got some stories in there too that I can share.
Oh, I'm sure. When we're talking to businesses of those different sizes and we're talking about storytelling is kind of intrinsically a personal thing. But when you have a big corporation that is so many different key stakeholders, so many different faces and names and voices, where is that difference? How do you go from like the small personal stories to the corporate stories? What is the secret there?
Well, to beat the same drum, right? So if you're listening and understanding where those stories come from, that's the best part of it. And what I mean by that is, are you really paying attention to how it impacts somebody's life? Have you really sat down and said, okay, how are you going to use my product? And then watch somebody use your product or service, or, be really aware and don't talk, but listen when they're using your service. And you'll start to see, sometimes they'll give you the stories. Those are the best ones when you watch somebody do something and you're like, oh, that's it. And that's a lot of what we try to do. That's a lot of our initial impact with companies is we just try to listen, and we'll set a camera on people. We'll go out in the field and watch what their customers are doing. And you start to see how they're using it. And it's amazing because that is the story, right? And when you can do that, things change really quickly because people want to know how it impacts their life. And that's really the special sauce. It's understanding them. I think the front page of our website, the first thing it says is, it's not about you, it's about them. And I'm paraphrasing it, but that's basically it. You're not the hero of your own story. Your customer is the hero of your story. And that's where it all starts.
So when I talk about storytelling, I usually don't go the corporate route. I go very personal thought leader. I want to hear people's personal stories. But how have you helped people take those personal stories and still kind of flip it so that it isn't about them?
This is going to sound bad, and maybe it's too honest, but getting people's ego out of the way is the first step, right?
Yeah.
And that is the hardest part is, and we all do it, right? We all are really proud of the things we've accomplished and the things we've done. And if you're, an entrepreneur or a large corporation, small corporation, it doesn't matter. There's some level of ego around what you've done and who you think you are. And it's helping them get past that is a huge part of it.
And how have you seen people get past that, or how have you helped people get past that?
Sometimes we just have to show them. So we do something, and I don't want it to sound like a pitch, but we do something called, I call them discovery sessions. Everybody calls them something different. And we'll do it over Zoom, or we'll bring in cameras and record them. We'll mic them up, and we'll do not the entire company, but a big range. I want people from the factory floor to the sales guy to the president. We want everybody. And then nobody else is allowed in these. And you start to gather the information, you take notes, and then there's always an out brief presentation. And it's great because now you can start to see, oh, look what these people are saying. And so we talk to customers, the whole thing. And then we go back and present it. And it's amazing how just having that information and having a really honest conversation with people can start to change how they see or perceive themselves even. So we do that quite a bit. And it's those listening sessions. It's using their own words and their own ideas to shape what's happening.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about before we hit record is your first job in this space was in 1994. I was born in 1995. So you have been doing this for literally my entire life. And so much has changed. You mentioned like with AI and all the different changing technologies. What have you seen has been like the best change? And what are you really excited about with the new technologies that's coming up?
Can I switch your question a little bit?
Yeah.
I don't know that I've seen, the best change yet. I think change is always hard. And so one of the when people start asking me about AI, I see it as just another technological change in a whole long line. That job that I was talking about in 1994, one of the things they had back then, printing plates were still made with basically large negatives. And so they had a room, and it had a camera, they called it a stat camera, and it literally filled a wall. And then they would take a picture, and the negative would be what they would use to create a printing plate from. Right. So it goes way back. So computers were just kind of being used to set type and, improve and increase the speed in which we could do things. Within a few years, the people that were using the stat camera were pretty much out of a job, right? By the end of that decade, that had all changed. And then within a couple of years, everybody was, of course, the internet was the big conversation in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so everybody's like, well, print isn't dead. It's not going to change. We still need to market with print. It's more special than digital. And there was a few of us that were like, no, digital marketing is really the future of where things are at. And there was some resistance. And then I saw digital cameras come in, and everybody's like, well, it'll never replace film cameras. And, now we're streaming things on digital cameras to have these types of conversations. And, so many of those things just keep changing. And every time I remember a constant and consistent point of view where it was, this isn't going to change things. It's not going to evolve at the same rate. We're still going to do the old ways. And AI is really that same thing. It's the next thing. And while it's here, it's not totally here yet. But I do see, the future of where it's going and how it's changing, and knowing how we use it and how we can incorporate things to make things, more efficient, more impactful for customers. But there's a gap. The biggest gap I see right now is AI just doesn't carry the same level of authenticity that we need. And that's the biggest gap. And I don't know for sure. I'm guessing, and I kind of believe from the things that I've read and seen that it will probably be able to do that at some point. Is it this year? Probably not. But we're not decades away from it either. We're years.
It's funny because you say we'll be able to, but really what it will be able to do is mimic it. So it's still not the authenticity, it's faked authenticity, which is really interesting. And I know that's coming, and it's probably, like you said, it's not far into the future, and it's gonna become almost like a new version of media literacy, being able to tell what messages are authentic and what messages are that faked authenticity.
Right.
And that's going to be a challenge for not the marketers so much, but the consumers. And then the marketers will have to follow it up with trying to be better so that they can't see through it, maybe.
No, I think you're right. I mean, customers, so we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it since the pandemic, there's a level of cynicism that has come into play, right? We've seen some of the brand loyalty numbers drop off. Oh, excuse me. They're still pretty high though, right? 81% of consumers, still want to trust a brand before buying them. And, like 95%, it's in there. It's very high in terms of customers want stories that they can trust, that seem authentic. So that need is still there. I don't see that changing. And if you look at human history, how we tell stories, shapes culture in a really big way. So that's how we're wired. Like, this is part of our DNA. This is part of the psychology of a human being. We want authentic stories, and that is how we've always been wired. So that's not going to change in the near future. Who knows what implants they could put in our brains, or crazy things can happen. But
oh gosh,
we still, we're still human. We still want authenticity, and so yeah, I don't see brands being able to shy away from that. And I see customers driving the need for authenticity because they're still cynical, and they still want the truth. I mean, we see it in politics, we see it in consumerism. People want the truth. And so they're going to call BS if they see somebody that's just leaned in too far, too quick to AI, and it's not authentic. It's not going to resonate.
Yeah, I think marketing has seen such a drastic change, because if you look at almost all marketing now, at least the marketing that's doing well and what's actually performing, it's not sales messages anymore. And for years and years and years, if you got a good headline and a good sales message, you're good, you're golden. And that changed and was replaced, thankfully, with that authenticity, with that storytelling. And then AI came. And now I think AI is actually making things more difficult instead of making things easier, like it's supposed to, because you can create so much content really easily, but it's not what people want. And with the stories, I think it's going to, like, AI will never go away, but I think it's actually almost harming itself, because people are wanting to get that real so much more than they want all of this massive amounts of content.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your point. I mean, just look at social media and how social media has changed even in the last 5 years, not even the last 10 or 15, right? The thing, and I still believe this, I had clients that didn't believe me in like 2019 and 2020 when TikTok was starting to take off. And my point was, they are micro stories. And, it used to be a minute. Right now it's gotten longer, but they were videos, so they were harder to fake. Whereas, people could Photoshop an image pretty easily, or, so it became more real. And what was presented to you wasn't based on friends and family. It was based on what your interests were. So the whole platform felt more authentic than anything else that existed. And the psychology behind that is really what drove that in popularity, and why we've seen, younger generations, your generation, not as into Facebook, a little bit of Instagram, kind of fading if I'm reading the tea leaves and looking at the stats. And then you look at TikTok and everybody likes it more. And I mean, you can tell me I'm wrong. And I think that's probably one of the benefits of the age gap between us is, there's a lot of good information and knowledge there between the two of us, and probably some things worth sharing.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference in generations right now is kind of going back to what you're saying about trust and loyalty. I feel like older generations, it was very much like, this is the brand I use and I will always use it. And with like, I'm a kind of like a baby millennial. I think I just missed Gen Z by like a day and a half or something. And we're happy to switch brands if we find one that aligns with our values more. and one that we do feel like we trust. And I've seen all the data around with millennials. We want to align ourselves with companies that are aligned with a social cause. So we're happy to spend a little bit more if we know that a percentage is going to something that we care about. And I don't think I see that, at least in my opinion, as much with the older generations. It's like, I have always used this brand and I will use it till I die.
Yeah, which is great until those customers do die, and then a brand has to rethink itself completely. Yeah. Old Spice is one of my best examples of that.
Ooh.
So this will be an interesting case study for you. So my dad, my grandpa, they used Old Spice cologne, and it came in a little white bottle, kind of almost triangular, had kind of a round base, but it tapered at the top, right? Had a little gray knob. And if you were born probably before 1985, you probably had seen one of those bottles in somebody's medicine cabinet. And that was all they used. There was no need for another cologne. It didn't matter. There was no influence from my mom, my grandma, or anybody else. That was what grandpa used, right? By the early 2000s, they were obsolete. Nobody wanted Old Spice anymore, and they were dying. And then all of a sudden they made this really unique switch, which was, maybe we should market to women because they're making the purchasing decisions, and stop marketing to men. And that's what saved that brand, was this realization that we're targeting the wrong customer and we're telling the wrong story to the wrong people.
Yeah. And as soon as you said Old Spice, I knew that's where you were going to go with that. And it also makes me think of Stanley, like the Stanley Cups, not the hockey one. They've been around for over 100 years. And for the longest time, they're the brand that is the go-to for the like construction guys, because it keeps their water cold all day, their coffee hot. And that had always been their audience. And that's who, like, they thought their target audience, it was always like the retired police officer. It was the company foreman at the construction site. Like, that was their target. And then, these women, it was a shopping blog that was like, oh, wow, like I had this and I went shopping with my kids and I went through all of this stuff and everything. And I get home, my water's still cold. And they put it out on this blog, and they hit like record sales because they realized like they're talking to the wrong audience. They switched everything. And then, like, if you look before that, there weren't all these colors. They weren't partnering with Starbucks. Everything changed. It used to just be this kind of ugly, just metal canister. And now it is like, I have the knockoffs because I'm cheap, but I have like 12 of them. And that is normal now. Versus it's just, I buy one and I use it till I die.
Yeah. I would add in there, they were blue collar utilitarian, camping. Like, they were kind of the OG like camping brand. People wanted it because they were it. You wanted to go ice fishing in the winter. I'm from Wisconsin. Everybody had their Stanley thermos with hot chocolate or coffee. Like, that was it. And you're 1,000% correct. Those little shifts and understanding both your audience and how the market is changing. I mean, Kodak did a terrible job of adapting, right? They really aren't relevant at all anymore, but 30 years ago, they were massive company.
Yeah. And I think with Stanley, they should have taken a page out of Yeti's book, because Yeti is the same thing. It is basically the exact same brand, but they took off because they targeted a younger demographic. They targeted that fun and adventure lifestyle, and they didn't target like the old work guy, because the old work guy, it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they're going to buy it once and they're guaranteed to last forever. So if it gets a scratch on it, I don't care. Versus we're like, oh, it comes in pink, I need a new one. Yeah. So if they had just kind of paid attention to that, it probably would have happened a lot faster. But I mean, now they're doing all right. I think they'll be okay.
Stanley, yeah, I think they're going to be just fine, at least for quite a while.
Is there any other, I mean, like, you've been doing this for a while. Is there any other brand that you've seen make like a really cool switch?
I think insurance brands are one that's really worth kind of studying. If you really want to talk about branding and advertising, go back and look at, the 80s, even early 90s of what insurance was doing and how they were communicating with people. And then, look, now you have Geico and you have the State Farm with how they've really changed to, football and everything else that you see with them. The Mayhem, Allstate. They're great. They tell great stories. They really connect with people, and they've brought something that's really a hard topic to talk about. I mean, as an advertising, marketing, media brand, get an insurance company as a client, and you'll see really quick how good you are, because it is not an easy thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say that. One of the things that I think is really interesting with some of those insurance brands is they are massive and they're very unpersonal, but even though it's a personal topic, so they created a person. So now it's like, if you look at Progressive, you think of Flow.
Right.
And so it's not just like, oh, I just need insurance. It's like, oh, wait, I think of Flow. And then it's the same thing with real estate companies putting the realtors' faces on bus benches, because it makes you feel like you know a person. And that's probably one of the things they were missing for so long, was just, we need a person that we can latch onto and form some kind of bond with. So they just made a fake person that just feels so real. So it's just like, yeah, that one. I like Flow.
But they've done it. They've gone one step further and brought in, like, okay, now you recognize somebody and you've made a connection, which is hugely important, right? Which is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But then you add the story in there. So Mayhem does a good job of, oh yeah, look, that really could happen to me. Or Farmers Insurance, right? Where they say, well, these are real stories. And people are going, yeah, I guess that could happen to me. Or Aflac with the duck and right? Like, they all have the same model. They've kind of figured out the formula, but they've done a lot to change.
Yeah, I think my favorite one is that We Can't Stop You from Becoming Your Parents. I don't know which brand that is. It's either Allstate or State Farm or something, but that campaign I personally could watch all day.
Yeah,
it's just so real.
It is. It's good.
Jumping back to, you're talking about social media, and I did a lot of social media management at my first advertising agency job. And I remember it was just, okay, you have to post at least 3 to 5 times a week. And it was find basically a stock photo, slap a logo on it, and connect it to a service. And there you go. And you can't do that anymore.
You couldn't really do it back then. Everybody was just trying to work the algorithm to try to make something happen.
True. But I feel like that was just the way that it was done. And now it's not like, okay, I have to get this number of posts out. It's, I need to get quality posts out. And I'm curious, how you've seen with that shift, and kind of your thoughts on that, because it's really changed, I think, the whole social media marketing landscape.
It's changing. So the algorithm still benefits more, right? And this, I mean, even Google does this, right? So have you ever looked at companies' authority scores in Google? That kind of, right? So like every website, most people don't know this, but they're assigned a score. Yep. And that score is based on how credible they think you are. And so it's 0 to 100. And I mean, I've had companies come with a score of like an 8. And what it's saying is Google thinks you're in the 8th percentile of companies that they want to present in terms of, what they want to give you on your search engine results, right? Social media is the same way. They're looking at, are you giving good information? Because their product is us, right?
Yeah.
So they want the best content creators, and that's who they're going to present and push out to people. And so, yeah, the better quality that you're creating in terms of stories, in terms of content, that matters. But unfortunately, the amount also matters. And that is where the rub really comes today, is how do you figure out how to create the best stories, the best content in the most authentic way, and deliver still, 3 to 5 times a week, or in some cases 3 to 5 times a day. And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
What I've found is if you can get and so we do this with clients too, what is your narrative? What is the core? What is that red thread that's kind of goes through everything, and finding that can be really hard. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but if you can find that, that makes your content that much better, right? And everybody talks about brand guidelines and, oh, they're restrictive and I can't work within that. The truth is, if your brand and your guidelines are created at a high level in a very, very good way, you'll be able to make so much content and make it so much easier, because now you know what that kind of thread is, what the base for every story is going to be. And it's what your customers want, right? That comes down to a brand equals trust. That's the simplest definition. And so if your content is consistent and you are providing what your viewers want, they're going to listen, they're going to watch, and they're going to follow you because they want to see what you're doing. And so finding that thread, that is the key to really creating great content, and like making it easier and faster, and not sitting there wringing your hands going, what do I have to post today? What should I make? I haven't thought about, like it's a really awkward situation, but that's the truth, is you can make it much easier on yourself if you can figure out what the recipe for the formula is.
Yeah, I feel like it's extra awkward and extra just difficult with things like personal brands, because how much can you say about yourself? And at least for me, like I hate it. I tell everyone, like, you have to be on social. And then if you look at mine, it's like, oh, I forgot to post this year. But when we're talking about trust and we're talking about stories, you have to be telling the stories that are honest and authentic, but you can't only be showing your highlight reel. I feel like you also have to be showing the negative, the mistakes and all of that. How do you find that balance? Like, what do you recommend people do as far as actually showing some of the blooper reel instead of just that highlight reel?
Well, it comes back to, can you laugh at yourself, right? And so that's probably the litmus test for those things. Like, you want to find that middle ground between where you're taking away from the brand, where you might be opening doors of like, oh, maybe I can't trust that guy. He's, kind of weird or off, or its product isn't good. But you find that middle ground where there's some kind of authentic element in you where it's like, hey, I want to laugh at myself. This is what happened. And I think that's the test, is to find that, like, can you laugh at yourself about something? And is it laughable for other people to see? But that's probably where I would say test the water there before you went. Because I've seen people go too far the other way, and it's like, well, no, don't show me how easy it is to break your product, or don't, like that's too far. But if you want to tell me these stories or, little tidbits about something that's funny that you want to poke fun at yourself, that resonates with people.
If you know me, you know that my kind of whole brand story comes back to a really embarrassing tattoo. So I launched my whole career on talking about something that I did that was probably not the best. What's yours? What is your, I shouldn't talk about this, but I'm going to, because I have to laugh at myself story?
Well, you know what? I'm the worst at doing that. I'm far too serious of a person, I think, sometimes.
Oh, you got to fix it.
Yeah. And that is, now if you ask my family, they probably have 1,000 things. I have a 15-year-old daughter that would tell you right now that I'm probably the most embarrassing person in the world.
Naturally.
The thing that I probably need to laugh at myself more about, and maybe it's evident here, is I want to and preach all the time about being a great listener. And unless I put my conscious I'm a listener hat on, I talk way too much.
Oh, same.
Yeah. Like sometimes I'm like, shut up, why are you doing that? And I could probably make post after post of just me rambling without making any sense.
So basically you could have a podcast
by myself. Yeah, for sure.
No, I'm the same way. For me, it's my ADHD, because it's like you say something and then I think of something, and if I don't immediately say it, I'll forget it, like I've done with questions like this entire episode. So as soon as I get something in my head, I have to be like, okay, no, but listen to what they're saying. Don't just sit there waiting for your turn.
Oh yeah. Well, I have 4 monitors up with little things for me to remember and a scratch pad. So
4?
4. Yeah.
How do you know where to look?
Good question. I'm just trying to make it natural, so hopefully it does, and you don't just fake me out on this right now. But yeah, I've got screens of all kinds of things going on. Plus, I've got, you ever use a Remarkable tablet?
I've been wanting one.
I really love mine. I really do love it. They're probably pricier than we really
Yeah.
think.
That's why I don't have one.
Yeah, it was
like $700 for a notebook.
I didn't. I bought it and then didn't realize you needed the case, the pen, it starts adding up really quick. But
yeah. I got the Kindle Scribe as like an attempt to almost have a Remarkable. And I used it for a week and it is somewhere gathering dust, maybe eaten by my dog. I don't know.
I know where this is all the time because it's great because I can store so many things and I can organize it for a mind that's not always organized. Yeah. And I can go back and find things.
It's funny because literally today I was thinking like I should go see if the price went down.
Yeah, I don't know if it did. I haven't looked, but no, I mean at my older, more experienced age, remembering things becomes harder. So
it's hard for us too, I promise you. But you have 4 screens, and like I said, like how do you even know where to look? That's actually like a common thing with brands now. It's like, how do you stand out? How do you get people to notice? And you said something that was, what was it? You have to be the one, like the bold brand, the one afraid to, like not afraid to be different. Talk about that. What is it that as someone looking at 4 screens, what could pop up that would actually grab that attention away from the other 3?
Well, I mean, the good content is good content, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is things done well never go out of style.
Oh,
yeah. And to be honest, if you really, I mean, that holds up no matter what, right? If you look at athletes, Michael Jordan has never gone out of style because what he did is great. And there's no other way to look at it, right? So he's still relevant, almost 30 years after winning, back-to-back championships in Chicago, right? So it never goes out of style, and just being great and focusing on doing things well. And I guess that also goes with understanding what good is, which I think for some people is a little harder. But you can find that and you can learn that, and it's some people have it intrinsically, but it's also very much a learned thing for most people. And so you can figure out what good is, and when you see good, it will stick out. I promise you that. But I think, if we're talking about just brands and common brands, sometimes you can do very small things to make very big impacts. And so I can give you a couple examples. One, sometimes we'll use a trick whereby, say you have 4 competitors and you all have basically the same product, but you'll start to realize that you're all also talking about exactly the same things. So a bold brand is going to be the one that picks some benefit, something to wrap a story around. And even if everybody else has it, if you do it well and you put it in the market in a big way, not kind of hide it on one social media post, but put some dollars behind it, get it in front of people, you will basically create doubt in the mind of the customer of the other 3 brands, because maybe you're talking about one little thing. Well, now you own that. That's the thing that you own, and nobody else is talking about it. And it takes a bold brand to want to do that. But those types of things, that kind of shift, and you can always introduce other things. It doesn't mean that you have to only do that. But when you start that and you do it in a big way and you do it well, you will stand out. And all of a sudden you put this doubt, like, well, wait, why are they talking about that? Did the other ones not have that? And then you become that brand that's just, oh yeah, I have this, and everybody will talk about that. And there's little tricks like that in advertising that translate into storytelling and branding that can make a huge difference.
I think chewing gum is like a really good example of that. And because gum is gum. It's just that it's very simple. We all know what it is. There's nobody that's not like on board with gum, but they had to find those things that they could latch onto and like be like their kind of like their stake. And one of them went with like the dating route. Like, you don't want bad breath. You want to stay kissable. The one that I remember the most, which is funny because it's a brand that I never see anymore, and I think they might be dead, is Five Gum. And their commercials were like how it feels to chew five gum. And they almost went like the perfume route of like, how do you advertise a scent? I guess it's just some weird walking through a forest and there's drapes for some reason. Like it's just the weirdest commercials, but they're memorable. That's kind of what Five did. They just had the strangest experience related to a piece of chewing gum.
They've all, I mean, through history, I mean, if you won't remember these, but if you go back and look, the Double Mint twins.
I remember those.
Okay, you remember those. Okay, I didn't remember how long they lasted, but right, Double Mint. It's not even that good of a gum because it doesn't like it's good, but it's not great. But you know that lasted for probably 40 years as a campaign.
Was that because they were just attractive? Was that like just a sex sells kind of campaign?
Well, I mean, they did it with men and women, so yeah. But I think it was just fun. It was catchy, and there was a little tune, and you know, but it meant nothing about gum.
Yeah, it rarely does. But no, I think we see that a lot. Is brands will start to really increase in popularity. And you kind of said this before with ego and laughing at yourself. The ones that find just that kind of just kitschy hook that makes it like a little more personalized and a little less like corporate. It kind of just makes it like this company doesn't take themselves too seriously. That's when they really find their audience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you see it with, I mean, Wendy's is phenomenal at that. You have to follow them on social. Like, I
think my like dream job at one point was to be the person that handled Wendy's Twitter.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. So good.
but you know, they do it in they flip the story on its head a little bit and have some fun with it and poke fun at other people, and they get attention because they're willing to be bold and different. Yeah.
No, I love that. Well, we are almost at the 40-minute mark, and Larry is going to kill me if I don't wrap it up. So where can people get in touch with you, find out more about what you do, and work with you if they want to?
So in the best of storytelling, we chose the name Lore for the business just because everything should be some kind of lore that's existed over time, right? So,
and it also sounds like a Taylor Swift album. I love it.
I'm going to go with that's a compliment, but I'd never thought of it that way. That is actually kind of unique. And I don't have a thing against Taylor Swift. She's iconic. Something that everybody should probably pay very much attention to her.
100%.
You know, you can't deny that. So, but anyway, yes, Lore is the name of the business. LoreTold.com is where you can find us. And of course, you know, if you look up me on LinkedIn, it's Timothy Kalinowski on LinkedIn. You'll find me and the business, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, if you guys found some value here and want to continue telling your stories, which I know you do, hit that subscribe button. And thank you so much, Tim, for being here. And we'll talk to you next week.
Perfect. Talk soon. Thanks.